Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping aboard the most extravagant floating parties in ancient history, the luxury boat celebrations on the Nile River during Egypt's New Kingdom period. From gold-leafed barges carrying hundreds of guests to perfume cones melting on elaborate wigs, from dawn to dusk feasting to political deals made between dance performances, this is the story of how Egyptian elite turned river cruises into legendary social spectacles that combined pleasure, power, and excess on a scale that would make modern yacht parties look modest. So before we cast off, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see our global audience. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let's drift down the ancient Nile into a world of unimaginable luxury and entertainment. The Nile River at sunset during Egypt's New Kingdom period transforms into a glittering boulevard of pleasure craft, dozens of elaborately decorated barges drifting past Thebes, carrying the wealthy elite to evening entertainment that will last until dawn. The water reflecting oil lamps and torches, creating a magical atmosphere where politics, business, romance, and excess combine into unforgettable social spectacle. These weren't simple boat rides, but floating palaces of entertainment, commissioned by nobles, wealthy merchants, and high-ranking officials who competed to host the most elaborate parties, the most exotic entertainment, the most impressive displays of wealth and taste that would be gossiped about for weeks afterward. The boats themselves were architectural marvels, some measuring over 100 feet long, constructed from imported cedar and cypress, decorated with gold leaf and precious stones, painted with intricate designs showing gods and goddesses, fitted with silk awnings and linen curtains that created intimate spaces within larger vessel. The largest pleasure barges had multiple decks with separate areas for dining, dancing, music performance, and more private entertainments. The layout designed to accommodate up to 200 guests, moving between different activities throughout the night as mood and entertainment shifted. Preparation for major boat party began weeks in advance, coordinating entertainment, ordering special foods and wines, hiring musicians and dancers, arranging flowers and decorations, ensuring every detail would impress guests who attended similar events regularly and had high expectations for novelty and luxury. The guest list was carefully curated political and social document, including people who needed to be cultivated for business or political purposes, friends and family who formed the host's social circle, beautiful young people who added decorative element, and occasionally foreign visitors who brought an exotic flavor to proceedings. Invitations were delivered by personal messenger, written on fine papyrus with elegant hieratic script, the formality of delivery and quality of materials signaling the importance of event and status of host, acceptance or decline carrying social implications for future relationships and business opportunities. The guests arrived at the private dock as the sun began to setting, the golden hour providing perfect lighting for admiring each other's clothing and jewelry while boarding the barge, servants assisting with gangplanks and steady footing as partygoers transferred from shore to floating venue. The fashion on display rivaled any modern red carpet, women wearing elaborate pleated linen dresses so fine they were nearly transparent, adorned with beaded collars, golden bangles, jeweled earrings, and elaborate wigs styled with perfume cones that would melt throughout the evening, releasing fragrance as they moved and danced. Men wore similarly fine linens, though less transparent, their status displayed through jewelry, sandals with gold or silver decorations, staffs with precious metal fittings, and the quality of their wigs, which for wealthy Egyptians were essential fashion accessories, regardless of whether they had natural hair underneath. The perfume cones deserve special mention because they were unique to Egyptian elite culture. Solid cones of animal fat mixed with myrrh, frankincense, and other expensive aromatics, positioned on top of wigs where body heat would gradually melt them. the scented oil running down over wig and clothing, creating mobile perfume delivery system that intensified as the evening progressed and dancing raised body temperature. As guests boarded, servants offered welcome drinks, usually beer or wine mixed with honey and spices, served in elaborate cups made from precious metals or fine pottery, the beverages starting the evening's intoxication that would increase steadily as night wore on and inhibitions decreased proportionally. The boat cast off from private dock, beginning a slow drift down Nile or upstream depending on current and wind, the movement providing constantly changing views of riverbanks, temples, palaces, and countryside, the scenery becoming the backdrop for the evening's entertainment and social interactions. Musicians established themselves on forward deck, playing harps, lutes, drums, flutes, and other instruments in combinations that created soundtracks for the evening. The music ranging from gentle background melodies during dinner to energetic dance rhythms as the night progressed and the party atmosphere intensified. The musician class in Egypt was highly respected, many performers being temple-trained with years of education in music theory and performance, their skills valued enough that wealthy families employed permanent household musicians, while others worked freelance at multiple events, their reputation and booking fees reflecting their abilities. Female musicians were particularly valued. Many songs and performances featuring women singers and instrumentalists whose voices and playing were considered essential to proper entertainment. Their presence at party indicated hosts' wealth and cultural sophistication, their performances being subject of later gossip and evaluation by guests. Dancers made dramatic entrance once boat was underway and guests had settled with drinks, emerging from behind curtains in costumes that left little to imagination, their movements highly choreographed but suggesting sensuality and availability that was part of entertainment, even if not necessarily fulfilled in reality. Egyptian dance combined acrobatic elements with sensual movements, dancers performing backbends, splits, high kicks, and writhing motions that demonstrated physical flexibility and control, while providing visual spectacle for guests who appreciated both athletic ability and erotic suggestion. The dancers' costumes evolved throughout evening, starting relatively modest by Egyptian standards and becoming progressively minimal as night advanced and alcohol consumption increased, the strategic revealing maintaining audience interest and providing escalating visual stimulation coordinated with party's progression. Dinner service began with elaborate ritual, servants bringing water and natron for hand washing, presenting individual tables to guests reclining on cushions. The service style borrowed from Persian and later Greek influence, but adapted to Egyptian tastes and customs. The menu was designed to impress through variety and exotic ingredients, starting with appetizers of figs, dates, pomegranates, various breads with herb-infused oils, cheeses both local and imported, olives prepared in different styles, pickled vegetables that provided sharp flavors to stimulate appetite. Main courses featured multiple meat options: roasted duck, goose, gazelle, oryx, various fish from the Nile prepared with complex spice mixtures, the proteins accompanied by vegetable dishes showcasing Egyptian agriculture's bounty, lettuces, cucumbers, leeks, garlic, onions, lentils, chickpeas, all prepared with techniques that enhanced flavors while demonstrating kitchen staff's skills. The presentation rivaled the food quality. Dishes arranged on gold and silver platters, garnished with flower petals and herbs, served with theatrical flourish by professional servers who had trained extensively in proper service techniques and social protocols. Wine flowed continuously. Egypt produced its own wines, but wealthy hosts imported Greek, Syrian, and Lebanese varieties that commanded premium prices and conveyed status. The different wines paired with courses according to principles that Egyptian elite had developed through centuries of sophisticated dining culture. Wine quality was serious matter. Jars were labeled with vintage year, vineyard name, and wine master who supervised production, creating accountability system and allowing connoisseurs to compare different producers and years. The wine conversation being an important part of social interaction throughout the meal. Servants constantly refilled cups and cleared finished courses, their presence being simultaneously essential and invisible. Well-trained servants knowing how to anticipate needs without intruding on conversations, their discretion being valued quality that reflected well on the household that employed them. Between courses, entertainment continued with new acts. Acrobats performing impossible contortions, jugglers tossing multiple objects while balancing on precarious perches, comic performers telling jokes and stories that ranged from clever wordplay to crude physical humor, depending on audience response. Some entertainment was explicitly sexual, dancers simulating various acts, performers engaging in suggestive pantomimes, couples hired to provide voyeuristic entertainment for guests whose inhibitions had been lowered by alcohol and social atmosphere that encouraged experimentation beyond normal daily constraints. The prostitutes working these parties were high-class courtesans rather than street workers, educated women who could converse intelligently, perform music, recite poetry, and provide companionship that extended beyond merely physical services. Their presence at elite parties being an accepted part of social landscape despite official moral teachings about appropriate behavior. Many romantic and business connections formed at these parties, the relaxed atmosphere and alcohol consumption creating conditions where normally careful people revealed their interests and desires, leading to affairs, marriages, business partnerships, and political alliances that would be formalized in more sober settings later. The boat's movement created unique social dynamics. Guests couldn't easily leave if they became uncomfortable or bored, the floating venue forcing continued interaction and preventing early departures that might insult host. The captive audience effect intensifying social pressure to participate enthusiastically in entertainment and conversations. As night deepened, party often divided into different activity zones, some guests preferring continued feasting and drinking, others wanting to dance, some seeking quieter conversations in curtained areas, others pursuing romantic interests in even more private spaces. The boat's design facilitated these divisions with semi-private areas that provided illusion of intimacy while remaining technically part of larger party. The strategic architecture allowing simultaneous public and private behaviors that characterized elite Egyptian social culture. Gambling was popular late-night activity. Dice games and board games like Senet being played for significant stakes, the combination of alcohol and competitive gambling creating an atmosphere where fortunes changed hands and tempers occasionally flared, despite social expectations for maintaining composure. The servants managing these parties performed remarkable logistical feats, coordinating food service for dozens or hundreds of guests, managing wine supplies that would satisfy tastes ranging from refined to excessive, cleaning up continuously without disrupting entertainment, preventing accidents from drunk guests near the water, and discreetly handling the various messes that inevitably occurred. Boat parties sometimes featured exotic animals as status symbols and conversation pieces, monkeys trained to perform tricks, exotic birds in gilded cages, occasionally even small cats or other animals that demonstrated hosts' wealth and connections to trade networks, bringing curiosities from distant lands. The flower arrangements were elaborate art form, lotus blossoms being particularly prized for their religious symbolism and beauty, arranged in complex patterns that demonstrated florists' skills, the flowers being replaced throughout the evening as they wilted in the heat from lamps and bodies. Incense burned continuously, frankincense and myrrh creating an aromatic atmosphere that combined with perfume cones, flowers, food smells, and human odors into a complex olfactory landscape that was integral part of sensory experience. The careful management of scents being important hosting consideration. Some parties featured surprise entertainment, unexpected performers emerging mid-evening, dramatic reveals of spectacular desserts or special dishes, announcements of engagements or business deals, these planned surprises being carefully orchestrated to create memorable moments that would be discussed at future gatherings. The political discussions at these parties were often more significant than entertainment, deals being negotiated between courses, alliances formed over wine, information exchanged in conversations that appeared casual but carried serious consequences for participants' careers and fortunes. Women participated actively in these political conversations, Egyptian society allowing elite women more agency than many contemporary cultures, their insights and opinions being valued, especially regarding social dynamics and personal relationships that affected political and business success. The marriages arranged at or following boat parties often united powerful families, the informal atmosphere allowing potential spouses to meet and evaluate each other before formal negotiations, the party serving as extended interview process disguised as entertainment. Children of elite families sometimes attended these parties, at least early portions, before entertainment became too adult-oriented, their presence serving educational function, teaching them social skills and networks they would need as adults, the parties being training ground for the next generation of elite. The domestic staff required for a major boat party numbered dozens, from the boat crew managing navigation and maintenance, to kitchen staff preparing continuous food service, to servers, to musicians and entertainers, to security personnel ensuring valuable guests remained safe, the employment opportunities these parties created being a significant part of the urban economy. Some servants were temporary hires, specifically for the event. Others were permanent household staff who accompanied their employer to the party. Still others were professional party staff who specialized in serving at elite events, their expertise and discretion making them valuable enough to command premium wages. The cleanup after major boat party was substantial undertaking. Boats had to be scrubbed and restored to pristine condition, valuable items secured and inventoried, lost property collected and returned to owners, damage repaired before boat could be used again, the post-party work being as extensive as pre-party preparations. Morning after major boat party, gossip networks activated throughout Thebes, servants sharing what they witnessed, guests comparing notes about who did what with whom, reputations being made and destroyed through carefully calibrated spreading of information that respected some confidences while exploiting others for social advantage. The host's reputation rose or fell based on party success, truly spectacular events establishing social dominance that translated to business and political advantages. Failures or scandals damaging standing in ways requiring extensive damage control and possibly expensive future parties to rehabilitate image. Some boat parties were themed, Egyptian hosts borrowing ideas from Persian and Greek cultures they encountered through trade and diplomacy, creating fusion entertainment that demonstrated cosmopolitan sophistication while maintaining distinctly Egyptian character in execution and style. Religious themes were popular, parties honoring particular gods or celebrating religious festivals, the sacred and profane mixing in ways that seem contradictory to modern sensibilities, but made perfect sense in Egyptian religious culture that didn't separate spiritual from physical pleasures. Priests sometimes attended these parties, despite their supposed religious obligations to restraint. The reality being that elite priests were sophisticated social operators who understood networking importance, their presence lending respectability while they enjoyed same entertainments as secular guests. The seasonal variations in the Nile level affected party planning, low water limiting navigation options, flood season creating different currents and hazards, the changing river being a constant variable that experienced boat captains had to manage while maintaining smooth party atmosphere. Some parties traveled significant distances, beginning at sunset in Thebes and drifting downriver until dawn, the journey creating extended temporal space that separated party from normal life, the return trip next day being a sobering transition back to responsibility and sobriety. The star viewing was popular late-night activity, Egyptian astronomy being advanced science, guests identifying constellations and discussing their religious significance while reclining on upper deck, the intellectual conversation mixing with drunken philosophizing in ways typical of late-night gathering. Poetry recitation was valued entertainment, educated guests demonstrating their cultural refinement through memorized verses, the performance being competitive display of education and memory, while also serving romantic purposes when poems were directed toward specific listeners. Love poetry was particularly popular, Egyptian literature having rich tradition of romantic and erotic verse that could be quoted to express interest or demonstrate shared cultural knowledge, the poetry serving as sophisticated flirtation tool among educated elite. The morning arrival back at dock was carefully managed spectacle, servants ensuring guests could disembark with dignity despite previous night's excesses, providing screening and assistance that protected reputations while guests transitioned from party mode to public personas. Some guests remained on the boat throughout following day, continuing celebrations or recovering from the previous night's indulgences in relative privacy. The boat serving as a retreat where normal social rules remained suspended temporarily before the inevitable return to regular responsibilities. The economic impact of luxury boat parties was substantial, supporting craftspeople who built and maintained boats, farmers and merchants supplying food and wine, entertainers and musicians, florists and perfume makers, the entire supply chain benefiting from elite consumption patterns. Foreign visitors were sometimes shocked by Egyptian party culture. The combination of religious sophistication and sensual indulgence seeming contradictory. The casual mixing of social classes, at least during entertainment hours, violating assumptions about proper hierarchical separation. Greeks particularly found Egyptian parties both fascinating and scandalous, their accounts emphasizing exotic and sexual elements, while often missing the complex social and political functions these gatherings served, the cultural misunderstanding creating lasting stereotypes about Egyptian decadence. Romans later adopted many Egyptian party traditions, the famous Roman banquets owing significant debt to Egyptian models, though Romans typically credited Greeks rather than acknowledging Egyptian origins of many luxury entertainment practices. The artwork depicting boat parties provides modern understanding of these events. Tomb painting showing musicians, dancers, and feasting scenes, though likely idealized and censored compared to actual proceedings, still offering valuable visual documentation of elite social culture. Archaeological evidence includes actual boat parties discovered in burial contexts, the vessels being valuable enough to include in tombs as provisions for afterlife entertaining, their preservation allowing detailed study of construction techniques and decorative programs. The menu remains from some elite burials list foods served at memorial feasts, providing documentation of specific dishes and their preparation, the culinary details revealing sophisticated food culture that valued both variety and quality. Wine jar labels found at elite sites document the extensive wine trade and consumption patterns, the archaeological evidence supporting literary sources about Egyptian wine culture and connoisseurship among wealthy consumers. Musical instruments recovered from tombs and archaeological sites provide physical evidence of party soundscapes, the harps, lutes, drums, and flutes being playable reconstructions that allow modern musicians to recreate ancient Egyptian music with reasonable accuracy. The perfume production facilities discovered near major cities show industrial scale of fragrance manufacture, the infrastructure supporting luxury consumption revealing how important these products were to elite lifestyle and party culture. Textile remains demonstrate the extraordinary quality of fine linens worn at elite gatherings, the thread counts and weaving techniques rivaling modern fabrics, the translucent materials requiring advanced skills to produce and maintain. Jewelry found in elite burials represents the spectacular personal adornment displayed at parties, the gold, silver, and precious stonework demonstrating sophisticated metalworking and design aesthetics that defined Egyptian luxury goods. The economic records from temple and estate accounts document expenditures for entertainment and hospitality, the detailed bookkeeping revealing how much wealth flowed into party preparations and related luxury consumption. Legal texts occasionally mention disputes arising from party incidents, contracts gone wrong, property damage, reputation injuries, the legal documentation providing glimpses of problems that could arise when alcohol, wealth, and social competition combined in enclosed, floating environments. Medical texts describe treatments for overindulgence, hangover remedies, and digestive aids that physicians prescribed for wealthy patients who regularly participated in extended feasting, the medical attention being necessary consequence of elite social calendar. The moral literature sometimes criticized excessive partying while simultaneously describing it in detail, creating tension between official values emphasizing moderation and actual elite behavior that celebrated excess and sensual indulgence. Religious texts incorporated party imagery into descriptions of afterlife, the concept of eternal feasting being fundamental to Egyptian paradise, the boat parties serving as models for idealized existence beyond death, where celebration continued without consequences or hangovers. The democratization of party culture happened gradually, middle-class Egyptians imitating elite practices on smaller scales, hosting their own boat gatherings with fewer guests and simpler entertainment, but same basic format, the cultural diffusion spreading luxury practices downward through social hierarchy. Provincial elites copied Theban and Memphis party styles, adapting them to local resources and customs, creating regional variations while maintaining recognizable core elements that defined Egyptian luxury entertainment across the kingdom. Foreign rulers visiting Egypt were entertained at spectacular boat parties, the diplomatic hosting serving political purposes by demonstrating Egypt's wealth and sophistication, impressing visitors with cultural achievements that reinforced Egypt's regional prestige and power. The decline of these elaborate boat parties paralleled Egypt's political decline, as resources diminished and foreign occupations disrupted traditional elite culture, the parties becoming smaller, less frequent, eventually disappearing as distinctive Egyptian social institution. Persian occupation brought different entertainment traditions that gradually displaced native practices, though some elements persisted in modified forms. The cultural transformation reflecting broader political and social changes affecting all aspects of Egyptian civilization. Greek and later Roman rule completely transformed entertainment culture, introducing Mediterranean styles that emphasized different values and aesthetics, the original Egyptian boat party tradition being remembered in historical texts but no longer practiced in authentic form. The legacy persists in modern Egyptian culture, through wedding boats and Nile cruises that echo ancient traditions, though contemporary versions lack the religious significance and social complexity that characterized pharaonic-era gatherings. The tourist river cruises on modern Nile follow routes where ancient boat parties once drifted. The commercial entertainment industry exploiting romantic associations with pharaonic past, while offering sanitized versions of experiences that were actually far more complex and socially significant. The archaeological sites along Nile preserve remains of private docks and boat facilities where ancient parties began. The physical infrastructure of elite entertaining still visible in ruins that hint at vanished world of luxury and excess. Museum collections display artifacts from boat parties, wine vessels, serving platters, musical instruments, jewelry, cosmetic containers, all the material culture of elite entertaining preserved in contexts that separate objects from vibrant social life they once served. The academic study of ancient Egyptian parties reveals a sophisticated society that valued sensory pleasure, artistic achievement, social networking, and political maneuvering in equal measures. The gatherings serving multiple functions simultaneously in ways that make them a fascinating subject for historical and anthropological analysis. Modern interpretations sometimes romanticize these parties while missing their darker aspects: social pressure, political maneuvering, exploitation of servants and entertainers, the underlying inequalities that made luxury possible for few, while majority struggled with basic survival. The environmental impact of elite consumption included deforestation for boat construction, overfishing of Nile species served at parties, diversion of agricultural resources to luxury goods, the ecological footprint of pharaonic partying being significant though rarely considered in ancient sources. The cultural appropriation debates apply even to ancient contexts, as Egyptians borrowed Persian and Greek elements while maintaining cultural superiority attitudes. The dynamics of cultural exchange and dominance operating even in ancient entertainment practices. The gender dynamics at these parties reflected broader Egyptian society, where women had more legal rights than many contemporary cultures, but still faced limitations and expectations based on gender. The party atmosphere provided temporary freedom, while reinforcing ultimate social hierarchies. The class dynamics were simultaneously reinforced and temporarily suspended, servants mixing with elite in entertainment contexts while maintaining fundamental inequalities. The social complexity created tensions that party atmosphere both revealed and temporarily resolved. The religious dimensions permeated even seemingly secular entertainment, gods being invoked in toasts, prayers accompanying food service, divine presence assumed in all human activities, including partying, the integration of sacred and profane being fundamental Egyptian worldview. The artistic legacy includes music, dance, and decorative traditions that influenced subsequent cultures. Egyptian aesthetic principles spreading through trade and conquest. The party culture being one vehicle for cultural transmission and exchange across the Mediterranean world. The technological innovations required for elaborate boat parties included advances in boat construction, food preservation, textile production, perfume manufacture, all the material culture supporting luxury consumption, driving innovations that had broader economic and social applications. The social mobility possible through successful party hosting allowed ambitious individuals to establish or enhance their elite status, entertainment skill being a valued form of social capital that could translate to political and economic opportunities. The decline narratives that moralists constructed blamed partying for Egypt's political problems, creating cautionary tales about luxury and excess, causing civilizational collapse, though actual historical causation was far more complex than moral explanations suggested. The nostalgic remembering of these parties in later periods created idealized past that served various cultural and political purposes, the Golden Age mythology using party culture as symbol of lost greatness and cultural sophistication. The comparative analyses with other ancient party cultures reveals both universal elements of elite entertaining and distinctly Egyptian features that reflected specific religious beliefs, environmental conditions, and social structures of Nile Valley civilization. The archaeological challenges of studying ancient parties include the ephemeral nature of food, flowers, and performances, material culture surviving better than actual experiences, the reconstruction requiring imagination informed by fragmentary evidence and comparative studies. The modern recreations attempted by museums and cultural organizations face challenges of authentic reproduction versus contemporary expectations, educational goals versus entertainment value, historical accuracy versus practical constraints of modern contexts and sensibilities. The tourism industry's exploitation of ancient party imagery creates economic opportunities while potentially distorting historical understanding, commercial interests shaping presentations in ways that prioritize marketability over accuracy. The cultural heritage debates about appropriate use of ancient Egyptian imagery include party themes, costumes, and entertainment styles, questions of respect versus appropriation being contested in museum programs and commercial ventures. The continuing fascination with ancient Egyptian luxury reflects modern preoccupations with wealth, celebrity, and excess, finding ancient precedents for contemporary concerns and values, the past serving as a mirror for present anxieties and aspirations. The educational value of studying these parties extends beyond entertainment history to illuminate broader aspects of Egyptian society, economics, religion, gender relations, cultural exchange, the gatherings providing a microcosm of civilization's values and practices. The preservation challenges facing Nile Valley archaeological sites include threats to boat remains and related infrastructure, environmental changes affecting preservation conditions, development pressures destroying contexts before proper documentation, the ongoing loss making scholarly reconstruction increasingly difficult. The digital reconstructions using archaeological and textual evidence create virtual experiences of ancient parties, technology allowing immersive historical education while raising questions about speculative elements in reconstructions that go beyond available evidence. The interdisciplinary collaboration required for comprehensive understanding includes archaeologists, historians, art historians, musicologists, food historians, textile specialists, all contributing specialized knowledge to create a fuller picture of complex social phenomenon. The public interest in ancient Egyptian parties exceeds academic study. Popular culture incorporating imagery and themes in films, novels, themed events, the ancient gatherings inspiring modern entertainments that claim connection to pharaonic past. The lessons drawn from studying these parties vary widely. Some emphasize cultural achievement and sophistication. Others focus on inequality and exploitation. Still others find universal human impulses toward celebration and social bonding, interpretive frameworks revealing modern values as much as ancient realities. The Nile continues flowing past ruins of ancient party venues, the river being constant, while human civilizations and their entertainment practices rise and fall. The eternal waterway witnessing countless celebrations across millennia of continuous human habitation and cultural development. The archaeological record preserves fragments of joyous occasions, broken wine jars, discarded jewelry, architectural remains of pleasure boats, material traces of ephemeral experiences that once meant everything to participants now reduced to scholarly analysis and museum displays. The human desire for celebration and social connection transcends specific cultures and historical periods. Ancient Egyptian boat parties, representing distinctive expression of universal impulses toward gathering, feasting, entertainment, and temporarily escaping daily concerns through organized pleasure. The elaborate preparations and enormous resources devoted to these parties demonstrate how seriously ancient Egyptians took their entertainment. Social bonding through shared luxury being a fundamental aspect of elite culture that reinforced group identity and hierarchical structures. The nights on Nile filled with music, laughter, romance, and political maneuvering represent pinnacle of pharaonic social achievement. Floating palaces of pleasure, drifting through the darkness, while guests celebrated life with intensity born from awareness that even the greatest civilizations and most powerful individuals face mortality's inevitable end. The legacy of these extraordinary celebrations persists in historical memory, archaeological remains, and continuing fascination with ancient Egyptian civilization, the boat parties being distinctively Egyptian contribution to human cultural heritage, an eternal testament to sophisticated society that understood how to combine pleasure, politics, religion, and artistic achievement into unforgettable social experiences that defined elite life in one of history's greatest civilizations. The luxury and excess and creativity of these floating festivals, representing pharaonic Egypt at its most magnificently human and eternally fascinating height.
All right, guys, now we continue with the other part of our ancient party journey, Roman banquets. If you thought those Egyptian boat parties were excessive, buckle up, because the Romans took the concept of too much food and turned it into a 9-hour performance art piece. From peacock brains to dormice stuffed with pork, this is the story of how ancient Rome's elite turned dinner into an endurance sport that would make modern competitive eaters weep. You're reclining on a cushioned couch at a Roman villa somewhere around 100 CE, and you're about to experience a cena, the main meal of the day, which will somehow last longer than most modern weddings. Your host is a wealthy senator who believes that subtlety is for poor people, and that if you're not serving at least 7 courses, you're basically insulting your guests. The triclinium, the dining room, is arranged with 3 large couches forming a U shape around low tables. Each couch holds 3 diners, and the positioning is everything. The most honored guest gets the lectus medius, the middle couch, in the spot closest to the host. Everyone else is arranged by social status in a careful hierarchy that someone spent hours calculating. Sitting in the wrong spot isn't just awkward, it's a public declaration of your social ranking. You're not sitting, though. You're reclining, propped up on your left elbow, which sounds comfortable until you realize you'll be in this position for the next 8 to 9 hours. The Romans believed this was the most civilized way to dine, probably because they never had to deal with the arm numbness that sets in around hour 3. The room itself is a calculated display of wealth. Frescoes cover every wall, depicting mythological scenes, elaborate gardens, or architectural illusions that make the room look bigger. The floor is decorated with intricate mosaics, often featuring sea creatures, hunting scenes, or geometric patterns that required months of painstaking work by craftsmen who probably never got invited to banquets like this one. Oil lamps flicker throughout the room, dozens of them, because apparently Romans believed that if you could still see shadows, you weren't using enough lamps. The smell of burning olive oil mixes with incense, perfumes, and the gradually intensifying aroma of cooking food. It's a sensory experience designed to overwhelm you before you've even taken a single bite. Slaves move silently through the space, and there are a lot of them. One slave for every guest is considered the bare minimum for a respectable banquet. Some are assigned to specific guests, responsible for washing hands, filling wine cups, and generally anticipating every possible need. Others work the roam, managing the flow of dishes, clearing tables, and trying to remain invisible while being constantly summoned. The meal begins with the gustatio, the appetizer course, which the Romans approach with the same restraint a child shows in a candy store. Eggs are traditional, leading to the saying, ab ovo usque ad mala, from eggs to apples, meaning from start to finish. But these aren't just boiled eggs. They're peacock eggs, or quail eggs, or eggs that have been somehow transformed through cooking techniques that took the kitchen staff all day to execute. As a lay alla mate come oysters, because apparently the Romans discovered that bivalves and excessive drinking pair wonderfully. The oysters have been transported from the coast in special containers filled with seawater, kept alive through the journey by slaves whose only job is oyster logistics. Some have traveled hundreds of miles to end up on this table, which seems excessive until you remember that everything about this evening is excessive. There are also dishes of olives, multiple varieties arranged by color and size. Mushrooms that were foraged at dawn by people who really hope they've correctly identified the edible species. Fresh vegetables dressed with garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans put on absolutely everything the way modern people use hot sauce or ranch dressing. The wine service begins immediately, and it will continue relentlessly for the entire evening. Romans don't drink wine straight, though. That would be barbaric. Instead, it's mixed with water in a large vessel called a crater, and the ratio of wine to water is the subject of intense debate. Too much water and you're insulting your guests with weak drinks. Too much wine and you're encouraging uncivilized behavior, though given what's coming later in the evening, that ship may have already sailed. A slave tastes the wine first, not for quality control, but to prove it isn't poisoned. This is ancient Rome, where dinner parties can have higher stakes than you'd expect. Political rivals dine together all the time, and trust is a commodity in short supply. The slave survives, the guests relax slightly, and the drinking begins in earnest. Between the appetizer course and the main meal, there's entertainment. Not just music playing softly in the background, but full performances. Musicians with lyres, flutes, and drums fill the room with melodies. Dancers perform elaborate routines, their movements carefully choreographed to be impressive without being so energetic that they distract from the food. Sometimes there are acrobats, contorting themselves into positions that make you uncomfortable just watching. Or poets reciting verses that may be classics or maybe original compositions praising the host with a level of flattery that would make a modern influencer blush. The host beams, accepting the praise as his natural due, while the other guests applaud with enthusiasm calibrated precisely to their relationship with the host. The conversation during the gustatio is carefully modulated. Politics can be discussed, but only obliquely. Business matters are acceptable, but not with the crudeness of actual negotiation. Philosophical topics are encouraged, particularly if they allow participants to show off their Greek education. Stoicism is fashionable right now, which is ironic given that everyone is participating in an event that would make a Stoic philosopher weep at the sheer excess. The tables are cleared with military efficiency. Slaves swoop in, removing plates and cups, wiping down surfaces, and resetting everything for the next course. The coordination required is impressive.
Nothing clatters, nothing spills, and within minutes it's as if the appetizers never existed. Now comes the prima mensa, the main course, and this is where things get truly excessive. The dishes arrive in a parade that seems designed to defy both logic and good taste. Whole roasted pigs, their skin crisped to perfection. Peacocks, cooked and then reassembled with their feathers to create the illusion they're still alive. Fish, so fresh they were swimming in the villa's private fish pond this morning. There's a dish called porcus troianos, a Trojan pig, which is a whole roasted pig stuffed with smaller animals. Inside the pig you might find sausages, thrushes, dormice, and other creatures, creating a kind of ancient turducken that makes you question the chef's sanity. The symbolism references the Trojan horse because apparently Romans can't even eat dinner without making classical references. Speaking of dormice, they're a delicacy, and they're everywhere at upscale Roman banquets. These aren't regular dormice caught in the wild. They're specially raised in jars called gliraria, fattened on chestnuts and acorns until they're plump enough to satisfy Roman tastes. Then they're roasted, often stuffed with pork and pine nuts, because apparently a dormouse alone isn't quite rich enough. The birds are particularly impressive. Flamingo, served with its famous tongue as a special delicacy. Ostrich, cooked with a sauce that probably required more ingredients than most modern recipes use in a month. Larks, thrushes, and other songbirds consumed in quantities that would horrify modern conservationists. The sauces deserve their own discussion. Romans rarely serve anything plain. Every dish comes with elaborate sauces made from combinations that sound random until you taste them. Garum, that fermented fish sauce, is the base of almost everything. To that, they add honey, vinegar, wine, herbs, spices, and whatever else the cook thinks might work. Some sauces are sweet, some savory, some both in ways that confuse your taste buds. Pepper is everywhere because pepper is expensive, and serving expensive things is the point. Black pepper from India has traveled thousands of miles to end up on this table, and your host wants you to know it. The same goes for exotic spices, rare herbs, and ingredients that required more effort to obtain than they're probably worth. The vegetables, when they appear, are almost an afterthought. Cabbage cooked with cumin, beets dressed with mustard, leeks in a sauce that's more elaborate than the leeks deserve. The Romans have access to a wide variety of vegetables, but vegetables don't demonstrate wealth the way roasted peacock does, so they're relegated to supporting roles. Bread appears throughout the meal, but it's not just any bread. There are multiple types, each with different grains, different shapes, different purposes. White bread made from the finest wheat flour for the important guests. Darker, coarser breads for those of lower status, though at a banquet this prestigious, even the lower quality bread is better than what most Romans eat daily. The wine continues flowing, and by now the mixing ratios are becoming more generous. Conversations are getting louder, gestures more expansive. Someone starts a debate about whether Virgil or Homer was the greater poet, which will probably continue for the next hour and resolve nothing. Another group discusses racing teams from the Circus Maximus, with the passion modern people reserve for sports franchises. The slaves continue their silent choreography, replacing wine cups, offering water for hand washing, providing napkins when needed. Romans eat with their hands, which means frequent washing is essential. The finger bowls themselves are works of art, silver or bronze vessels filled with rose-scented water. Even the act of cleaning your hands is an opportunity to display wealth. Halfway through the main course, there's often a pause for what Romans call a commissatio, a drinking bout that's more structured than it sounds. A master of drinking is elected, usually through a dice game, and this person decides the wine-to-water ratio for the next round. They might also propose toasts, suggest drinking games, or otherwise orchestrate the group's intoxication with the careful planning of a military campaign. The drinking games vary. Sometimes it's simple toasts, where each guest must drink a certain number of cups to honor someone. Other times, it's kotabos, a Greek import, where you flick wine dregs at a target, combining drinking with competitive accuracy. The Romans inherited this from Greek symposia and never quite let it go, even though flicking wine around an elaborately decorated dining room seems questionable at best. The entertainment intensifies as the evening progresses. More musicians arrive, playing more energetically. Dancers perform more daring routines. Sometimes there are theatrical performances, short comedic sketches, or dramatic scenes from famous plays. The humor tends toward the body, becoming more so as the wine consumption increases and inhibitions decrease. Occasionally, there are more unusual entertainments, performing animals trained to do tricks that seem impressive until you remember these are wild animals in a crowded room full of drunk Romans. Or gladiator demonstrations, although hopefully not actual combat, because things are messy enough without bloodshed. Sometimes there are magicians, illusionists, who perform tricks that would be more impressive if half the audience wasn't too wine-soaked to follow along. The host might show off his art collection during a lull between courses. Statues, paintings, maybe some Greek antiquities acquired at great expense. He'll casually mention how much each piece cost, disguised as historical context, making sure everyone understands exactly how wealthy he is. Guests make appropriate appreciative noises while mentally calculating whether they can afford something similar. As the main course continues, the dishes become increasingly exotic. Sow's udders, considered a delicacy for their rich taste and soft texture. Brains from various animals, prepared in ways that make them palatable to people who have moved far beyond caring about what they're eating. Tongues, especially from birds, prized for reasons that probably made more sense when someone first decided to eat them. There's often a showpiece dish, designed more for spectacle than taste. A whole wild boar with live birds sewn inside so that when the boar is carved, the birds fly out. A fish dish arranged to look like the creatures are still swimming. A dessert structure that resembles a temple or palace, constructed from honey cakes and fruit with architectural precision. The conversation topics shift as the wine takes effect. Philosophy gives way to gossip. Who's having an affair with whom? Which senator is in financial trouble? What scandalous thing happened at someone else's banquet last week? The Romans love scandal, and a good dinner party is basically an oral newspaper, spreading news and rumors with equal enthusiasm. Politics becomes more frank, more dangerous. Criticisms of the emperor that would be treasonous in public become whispered conversations in the relative safety of a private banquet, though relative safety is doing a lot of work there, because who knows which guest might report back to the wrong people. Paranoia and wine make strange companions, leading to conversations that are simultaneously indiscreet and carefully guarded. The room is getting warmer now from all the bodies, the lamps, the braziers burning to keep the temperature comfortable. The mix of perfumes, wine, food smells, and incense creates an atmosphere that's overwhelming in its intensity. Some guests are looking slightly green, not necessarily from the food, but from the sheer sensory overload of the evening. Which brings us to one of the more infamous aspects of Roman banquets, the vomitorium. Popular culture gets this wrong. A vomitorium is actually just a passageway in a stadium, nothing to do with throwing up. But the practice of purging during a long banquet to make room for more food, that definitely happened. Not universally, not at every banquet, but enough that it became part of Roman dining culture. Some banquets had rooms or facilities for this purpose. Guests who had eaten themselves to the point of discomfort could excuse themselves, purge, and return to continue eating. Romans saw this as practical rather than disgusting, a logical solution to the problem of wanting to taste everything at a 9-hour feast. Modern sensibilities might differ, but the Romans were remarkably pragmatic about bodily functions. The slaves tasked with attending to guests who needed these facilities maintained the impassive professionalism they showed during food service. It was just another part of their duties, neither more nor less dignified than any other service they provided. The class divide in Roman society meant that slaves were often invisible to their owners, their labor and presence simultaneously essential and ignored. As the main course finally winds down, there's another pause for cleaning and resetting. The tables are completely cleared, wiped down, sometimes even replaced with fresh ones. Guests are offered more rose water for hand washing. Wine cups are refilled. There's a brief intermission where people can stretch their increasingly numb left arms and contemplate whether they have room for dessert. The answer is always yes, because this is Rome and moderation is for barbarians. The secunda mensa, the dessert course, arrives with the same excessive enthusiasm as everything that came before. Fresh fruit, which sounds simple until you realize the fruit has been arranged into elaborate sculptural displays. Apples, pears, grapes, pomegranates, figs, dates, all presented as if they're precious jewels rather than things that grow on trees. Honey cakes are everywhere because sugar isn't really a thing yet, and honey is the primary sweetener. These aren't simple cakes, though. They're layered, filled with nuts and dried fruits, shaped into elaborate forms. Some are fried in olive oil, creating something like an ancient donut. Others are baked and soaked in wine, creating a soggy, sweet concoction that seems designed to push guests past their limits. There are pastries filled with honey and cheese, a combination that sounds odd but works surprisingly well. Custards and puddings made with milk and eggs, preserved fruits from distant provinces, their exotic origins mentioned repeatedly to ensure everyone appreciates the expense and effort involved. Nuts appear in abundance: almonds, walnuts, pine nuts, chestnuts, served roasted, candied in honey, or incorporated into various sweet preparations. Sometimes they're fashioned into elaborate shapes, nut pastes molded and decorated to resemble fruits or flowers or miniature sculptures. The wine at this point is often mixed with honey, creating a drink called molsum that's sweeter and smoother than the regular wine. Some guests switch to this exclusively for the dessert course. Others stubbornly continue with regular wine because they're Romans and they didn't recline on a couch for 6 hours to start drinking responsibly now. The entertainment during dessert often becomes more intimate, more personal. Maybe the host recites poetry he's written himself, inflicting his literary ambitions on a captive audience too polite or too drunk to object. Or guests take turns singing, displaying varying levels of talent while everyone else applauds regardless. Sometimes there are games, word games, riddles, literary challenges where participants try to outdo each other in obscure references to Greek classics. The Romans are competitive about everything, including demonstrating cultural sophistication, and dessert is as good a time as any to show off one's education. The conversation becomes more philosophical again, or tries to be. Wine-soaked attempts at discussing Epicureanism, Stoicism, or the nature of virtue tend to be more entertaining than enlightening at this point. Someone always argues that pleasure is the highest good, which is convenient justification for everything that's happened this evening. Love and poetry become popular topics. Who's courting whom? Who's written the best love poems? Who's conducting the most scandalous affair? The Romans are dramatic about romance, seeing themselves as characters in an epic story, even when the reality is probably more mundane. Wine and self-importance create elaborate narratives from simple attraction. As the evening stretches towards its 8th or 9th hour, some guests are noticeably struggling. Reclining for this long is uncomfortable regardless of how cushioned the couch is. Combined with massive food consumption and continuous wine drinking, many are reaching their limits. But leaving early is a social faux pas, an insult to the host, so everyone soldiers on. The host, meanwhile, is in his element. This is his triumph, his demonstration of wealth, taste, and social power. He spent a fortune on this banquet, months in planning, countless hours directing slaves and suppliers to create exactly the right impression. And judging by the stuffed, slightly glazed expressions of his guests, he succeeded spectacularly. More wine appears, impossibly. Rare vintages, wines from famous regions, wines that have been aged for years in amphoras sealed with specific types of clay. The host describes each one's provenance in detail that would make a modern sommelier nod approvingly, if the sommelier could get past the part where Romans mix even their finest wines with water and honey. The final treats of the evening are often the most exotic. Dates stuffed with nuts and honey, a recipe that's traveled from North Africa. Honey-glazed chestnuts, prepared with a special technique. Sometimes there is snow, brought down from the mountains and preserved in ice houses, mixed with fruit juice or wine to create something like an ancient sorbet. This snow is particularly impressive because it represents not just wealth, but logistical capability. Servants had to harvest the snow, transport it without it melting, store it properly, and keep it frozen until the exact moment it's needed. It's excessive, impractical, and absolutely perfect for a Roman banquet trying to impress. The lamps are burning lower now, some guttering out. Slaves move through to replace them, trim wicks, and add more oil. The light becomes softer, more forgiving, which is probably merciful given the state of some guests. Shadows dance across the frescoed walls, giving the mythological scenes an eerie life of their own. Incense is refreshed, new braziers brought in with different scents. Frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, expensive aromatics that create clouds of perfumed smoke. Combined with the wine vapors and food smells, the air is thick enough to feel substantial, like you could reach out and touch the atmosphere itself. Someone starts a debate about the nature of the afterlife. Are the gods real? Does anything exist after death? Is virtue its own reward, or should we pursue pleasure while we can? These are the kind of questions that seem profound after 8 hours of drinking, though they'll probably seem less meaningful tomorrow morning. The entertainment has mellowed into background music, soft and soothing. The energetic performers from earlier have been replaced by or have simply exhausted themselves into playing gentler melodies.
A lone flute weaves through the conversation, providing a soundtrack to the evening slow wind down. Guests begin making their excuses, carefully phrased to express gratitude while acknowledging the late hour. The host accepts these departures graciously, knowing he's successfully kept people entertained for an entire evening. Slaves fetch cloaks, arrange for litters or transportation, help unsteady guests navigate their way out. Some guests are carrying gifts, small tokens the host provided, maybe a portion of the banquet's food wrapped carefully to take home, a small jar of wine, a honey cake. These parting gifts are traditional, a final gesture of hospitality and another demonstration of generosity. The wealthiest guests are carried home in litters, reclining on cushions while slaves bear the weight through dark streets. Others walk, perhaps regretting the 9th hour of eating and drinking as they navigate uneven paving stones. Some are singing, others silent, all processing the evening's excess in their own way. Back in the triclinium, the cleanup begins immediately. Dozens of slaves move through the space like a well-trained army, removing every trace of the banquet. Plates, cups, serving dishes, all must be washed. The couches need cleaning, cushions restuffed or replaced. The floor, littered with food scraps, despite the best efforts during service, requires thorough sweeping and washing. The leftover food, and there's always leftover food from a proper Roman banquet, gets distributed according to careful hierarchy. Some goes to the host's household, feeding his extended familia tomorrow. Some is given to favored slaves as a bonus. Some might be sent to clients or political supporters who couldn't attend, a reminder of the host's generosity and their obligation to him. In Rome, social capital is real capital. The right connections can lead to political office, lucrative business deals, and advantageous marriages for your children. A well-executed banquet strengthens relationships, demonstrates wealth and taste, and reminds everyone of your importance in the social hierarchy. The peacock brains are just a means to an end. Other wealthy Romans are holding similar banquets tonight, all across the city, each trying to outdo the others in excess, creativity, or spectacle. It's a constant competition, an arms race of appetizers, where last month's impressive display becomes this month's baseline expectation. The truly wealthy maintain multiple dining rooms, each decorated differently, used for different occasions or different guests. Summer dining rooms with open sides to catch breezes, winter rooms with underfloor heating, elaborate rooms for important guests, simpler ones for everyday use, because even excess needs to be organized and categorized. Some villas have dining rooms that rotate, slowly turning to provide changing views throughout the meal. Others have elaborate water features, fountains, or streams running through the dining space. The wealthy compete not just in food, but in the experience, creating immersive environments that transport guests somewhere between reality and fantasy. The recipes used tonight will be carefully guarded, some of them at least. A particularly successful dish might be that chef's specialty, the thing that makes him valuable. Chefs are slaves, but skilled chefs can command high prices when sold or rented out. A truly exceptional cook might be more valuable than most free workers. The recipes themselves are passed down orally or through practice rather than written cookbooks. Some Roman cookbooks exist, like Apicius's famous collection, but they're more inspiration than instruction manual.
The actual techniques, the timing, the precise seasoning, these are learned through years of apprenticeship and practice. Many of the dishes served tonight would be difficult or impossible to replicate with modern ingredients. The ancient Roman taste profile was different, shaped by their available ingredients and culinary traditions. The garum they used isn't quite like any modern fish sauce. Their honey came from different flowers. Their wine was different in ways that affect every dish it touched. The social implications of tonight's banquet will ripple outward for weeks or months. Alliances formed or strengthened over wine and peacock. Business deals hinted at during dessert. Political positions subtly communicated through conversation and seating arrangements. The banquet is just the visible performance of a complex social dance that continues long after the last guest departs. Guests will talk about this evening at their own dinner parties, spreading the host's reputation for hospitality and wealth. They'll mention the exotic dishes, the impressive entertainment, the quality of the wine. Each retelling is free advertising, reinforcing the host's status and influence. Critics might whisper about excess, about waste, about priorities misaligned with traditional Roman values of restraint and discipline. But these critics are either too poor to compete or philosophical purists who've already lost the cultural battle against luxurious living. Elite Romans are committed to their excess, and no amount of philosophical scolding will change that. The morning after will bring its own challenges. Hangovers, certainly, for most guests, upset stomachs from the rich food, regrets about things said or done under wine's influence, but also satisfaction, the feeling of having participated in something special, an evening that exceeded ordinary experience. Slaves who worked the banquet get brief rest before returning to regular duties. Their exhaustion is irrelevant to the household schedule. The villa doesn't stop functioning because one elaborate dinner party went late into the night. There are still meals to prepare, rooms to clean, gardens to maintain, and countless other tasks that keep a wealthy Roman household operating. The head chef is already planning adjustments for the next banquet. That sauce that didn't quite work needs refinement. The timing on the roasted birds could be better. Perhaps a different approach to the dormice presentation. Excellence requires constant iteration, even in something as excessive as Roman dining. The host's wife, if she attended, has her own assessment of the evening. Roman women of status often participate in banquets, though their role and prominence varies by era and household. She might have her own social objectives, alliances to nurture, relationships to cultivate. The banquet serves her purposes as much as her husband's. The children of the household, if old enough, might have observed from the margins, learning the elaborate social codes that govern elite Roman life. How to recline properly, how to pace your eating and drinking, how to make conversation that's sophisticated without being controversial. These skills aren't taught in schools. They're absorbed through observation and practice. Tomorrow, gifts will be sent to the host. Thank you offerings from guests who understand the unwritten rules of reciprocity. A jar of fine wine, perhaps. A book copied by a skilled scribe. A small decorative item, valuable enough to show appreciation, but not so expensive as to suggest the guest is trying to outdo the host. Social navigation requires precision. The host will return these gestures with his own gifts, maintaining the cycle of obligation and generosity that binds Roman society together. Everyone owes everyone else in carefully calibrated amounts, creating a web of relationships that's stronger than any formal contract. This is how Rome actually functions, not through laws and institutions alone, but through personal connections maintained over shared meals and mutual obligations. In a few weeks, one of tonight's guests will host their own banquet, trying to match or exceed this evening's splendor. The cycle continues, each event raising the bar slightly higher, each host scrambling to find new ways to impress guests who've seen everything. Innovation becomes necessary, not for its own sake, but because yesterday's marvel is tomorrow's baseline. Some Romans travel to find new culinary ideas. They visit Greece, Egypt, Asia Minor, returning with recipes and techniques that can be adapted to Roman tastes. The empire's vast reach creates opportunities for cultural exchange, and nowhere is this more visible than in the constantly evolving landscape of elite dining. The written accounts of banquets, preserved in letters and histories, suggest that Romans themselves found their dining habits excessive. Writers like Juvenal and Martial satirized banquet culture, mocking the pretension and waste. But they also attended these banquets, participating even as they critiqued. The criticism was part of the culture, too, a knowing acknowledgement that things had gotten out of hand without any real intention to change. The contrast with earlier Roman values is stark. The legendary Romans of the Republic were supposedly simple, austere, focused on duty rather than pleasure. They ate basic foods, drank moderately, lived simply despite their wealth. Whether this was ever actually true is debatable, but it's the story Romans tell themselves about their virtuous ancestors. By the imperial period, those old values are more mythology than practice. The empire has brought incredible wealth, and that wealth seeks expression. Banquets are just one manifestation of a broader cultural shift toward luxury, comfort, and the conspicuous display of prosperity. The Romans have conquered the known world, and now they're enjoying the fruits of that conquest. The influence of Greek culture is everywhere in Roman banquets. The reclining posture, the symposium-style drinking, the philosophical discussions, all borrowed from Greek traditions. But Romans added their own elements: the extreme excess, the competitive display of wealth, the political maneuvering. They took Greek refinement and supersized it with Roman ambition. Foreign guests at Roman banquets, visitors from less wealthy provinces or barbarian territories beyond the empire, must find the experience overwhelming. The sheer quantity of food, the exotic ingredients, the elaborate service, the hours of eating and drinking. It's designed to overwhelm, to demonstrate Roman superiority not through military might, but through the casual display of resources that other peoples couldn't dream of mobilizing for a dinner party. The garum trade alone represents a significant portion of the empire's economy. Fish sauce factories dot the Mediterranean coast, processing tons of fish into the fermented condiment that Romans consider essential to civilized dining. The smell of these factories is legendary, offensive enough that they're kept far from residential areas, but the profits are substantial enough that nobody seriously considers shutting them down. The oyster trade is equally impressive. Oysters are harvested from coastal beds, kept alive in special containers, and transported across the empire to satisfy Roman demand. Some entrepreneurs have developed oyster farming techniques, cultivating beds specifically for the luxury market. The Romans have industrialized their excess, creating entire economic sectors devoted to feeding their appetites. Wine production has evolved into a sophisticated industry with regional varieties, vintage years, and quality distinctions that would impress modern sommeliers. Falernian wine from Campania is particularly prized, sometimes aged for decades. The truly wealthy maintain wine cellars that are carefully inventoried, each amphora labeled with its vintage and origin, treated as seriously as any modern wine collection. The spice trade connects Rome to the far reaches of the known world. Pepper from India, cinnamon from Arabia, exotic herbs from distant provinces. These spices travel thousands of miles, passing through multiple hands, each adding their markup, until they arrive in Roman kitchens at prices that make them genuine luxury goods. Using them liberally at a banquet is a statement about wealth as much as taste. The entertainment industry that services Roman banquets is substantial. Professional performers, musicians, dancers, actors, all make their living moving between wealthy households, providing the cultural programming that's expected at any respectable dinner party. The best performers command high fees and enjoy a kind of celebrity status, though they're still considered socially inferior to their wealthy patrons. Some banquets feature literary performances, readings from new works or classics. Poets hope that a successful banquet reading might lead to patronage, financial support from a wealthy Roman who wants to be known as a supporter of the arts. It's a transactional relationship, but it keeps literature alive and provides opportunities for talented writers who lack independent wealth. The medical profession also benefits from banquet culture. Doctors make good livings treating the predictable ailments of overeating and excessive drinking. Gout is practically an epidemic among the wealthy. Digestive problems are endemic. The irony of paying doctors to treat problems caused by excessive consumption that also required payment is apparently lost on most Romans, or at least not significant enough to change their behavior. As dawn approaches after tonight's banquet, the city slowly wakes to another day. Bakers are already at work preparing bread for the morning markets. Fishermen are bringing in their catches, some of which will appear at tomorrow night's banquets. The slaves who worked all night cleaning up after the party are finally finishing their tasks, collapsing into brief rest before the day's regular duties begin. As the host, finally alone, might reflect on the evening with satisfaction. The careful planning, the enormous expense, the hours of execution all came together into an event that will be remembered and discussed. His social position is reinforced, his reputation enhanced, his network of obligations and alliances strengthened. By Roman standards, the evening was a complete success. And somewhere across the city, another wealthy Roman is already planning their next banquet, determined to outdo tonight's spectacle, to find new ways to impress jaded guests who've seen everything. The competition never ends, the excess never peaks, because there's always another course to serve, another rare ingredient to source, another boundary of taste and restraint to cross in the endless pursuit of memorable dining. So ends another night of Roman hospitality, where food becomes art, excess becomes virtue, and 9 hours of eating somehow seems like a reasonable way to spend an evening. The pyramids took 20 years of patient labor, but Roman banquets achieved their own kind of monument building, constructing elaborate social structures one course at a time, using peacock brains and dormice as their limestone blocks. Thank you for joining me on this journey through ancient excess. From the methodical construction of Egyptian pyramids to the elaborate indulgence of Roman dining, we've explored how ancient peoples approached their grandest ambitions. I hope you've enjoyed this glimpse into history's most excessive dinner parties. Until next time, goodbye, and may your own meals be satisfying without requiring 9 hours and a small army of servants to complete.